Hello, welcome to the Lately in PHP podcast. This is episode 79, the first of 2017. And as always, I have here with me Arthur Sozins with uh, cold problems at home. Hello, Arthur. How are
Hello.
you dealing with the?
Well, every day I'm shoveling the snow, so
Yeah,
it's fun, really fun.
but you said you like it is colder weather, right?
Yeah, it's like, well, it's below -10, I think, on Celsius, so it's kind of cold.
It's pretty much like here. It's 32. Well, there must be some global warming, even if it's just on one side of the world. Anyway, we are here to talk about PHP, and I'm going to start just to review briefly the topics of this month, if I'm able to share the screen or not. Uh, okay, 5.6. This is the one. Can you see it now?
Not yet. Loading, loading. Yep, we can see it.
Okay. Okay. This month we are going to do as usual, starting with the topics related with the latest versions of PHP. Um, PHP 5.6 end of life has reached, but there was one last version in December. So it will enter in security only fixes from now on.
I just want
But
to add one more thing about it. I just noticed under standard there is HTTP stream wrapper should ignore HTTP 100 continue code. I think we actually discussed about this in some previous podcast when someone complained that HTTP stream wrapper does not support HTTP2 protocol.
yeah,
So I think this fix is related to it. They're listening and they're fixing. Nice.
yes, I thought they will be doing that for future versions, but okay, that is also fine. Anyway, there was yet another PHP 7.0 release, and there was the first 7.1 release. There was not yet an update, but there will probably will be one soon, one each month. Um, we already talked about PHP 7.1 release, but there are other things that are important to know. I already mentioned the end of life um, of PHP 5.6. There will be still 2 more years of security fixes support. So don't panic. But I already heard people complaining that their hosting companies have forced them to upgrade to PHP 7.0. It seems somebody already panicked, but well, that's the way it goes. Anyway, moving on, we have an article that we already mentioned last month, but this time we're going to take a look at it closer, which is an article about how the PHP performance evolved over time, at least since PHP 5. And we'll be talking about also what improvements happened in these versions to explain why the performance improved. Next, we are going to start talking about the usual set of proposals for the next PHP versions. We'll talk first about a concept that is being proposed. I don't know if it is going to be approved, but okay, it's a bit confusing. But they call it magic casting, which would
Yep.
allow to cast objects from one type to the expected type in PHP 7 by calling a cast double underscore cast function. It's a bit confusing how it works, but we'll get back to this when we talk about this proposal. Then we have just an RFC that somehow is basically a proposal to update the documentation about error codes of throwable errors, and basically this is to mention that some error codes could be usually numbers, but could also be strings. So this is probably more a documentation update than an actual feature. Then we'll get back to an old proposal that did not pass in the past. It's like people vote on proposals and then they get back to them later, a few months, when they failed to pass in the previous time. Maybe somebody agrees, maybe somebody changed their mind. But this one is specifically about property assessor syntax, which is a syntax that somewhat is inspired in .NET to define how variables of a class can be set using functions defined inside the class. Then there is a proposal, an RFC, which is also a bit hard to understand because you need to know how PHP works a bit internally. For instance, when we establish a database connection, it returns a resource value, which is in practice an integer, but they want to make it an object. They call it hash context. It's either this or I'm not understanding this feature, but we'll get back to this ahead. Then finally, we'll talk about a proposal for what is called decorated classes. These classes, it's to follow the decorated pattern, which is usually implemented with a subclass that works, defines functions that may be called before and after another function that is being decorated. So the proposal is to add a new keyword called decorates to make it more explicit that this is a decorated pattern. Well, these are the topics for this month. Not many topics, but let's get started with what we already mentioned, which is the release of the last PHP 5 version, PHP 5.629. Actually, it's not the last, it's the last with fixes on features. There will be other versions in the future of PHP 5.6, but those will be exclusively to perform security fixes. This is interesting because people will probably take some time to migrate their code to PHP 7. And this is probably more important for people that have shared hosting, because they may not have the control of the versions that they can run. And recently I saw people complaining that since somebody told this is the end of life of PHP 5, some hosts already rushed and forced the upgrade to PHP 7, which caused some chaos because people that have not prepared to upgrade their code, they will be in trouble. Make it work in a rush. I don't know. And this will be a problem. Well, personally, I've been working on migrating my code to PHP 7 in the development environment. But instead of jumping to PHP 7, I'm going to jump right to PHP 7.1 because if there are any backwards incompatibility changes, and there are some, of course, it's better to fix them to the latest version rather than just do a minor version at a time. So if you are planning to upgrade your PHP version, I suggest that you actually do it this way if you can. If you do not control the version of PHP that you are using, maybe you have to stick with whatever is the version that you may be running there. Anyway, there was also another version of PHP 7.0.14, which is the usual bug fixes. But there was not yet a new version of PHP 7.1. It will probably appear sometime soon. I did not find any discussions yet, but probably I did not look enough. Anyway, there is no rush, at least for me, because I'm not using PHP 7.1 in production. But I suspect that once a newer major version is released, there will be lots of bugs popping up because finally people are giving it a serious test. There will be much more people trying it, or not, I don't know, but I think so. Anyway, let's see how this goes. If somebody is complaining about anything, we'll probably hear about it a lot. I was trying to find, because this month we were not able to make a live coding, which is now called Live Edu Work. I was trying to find. Okay, I already found the streaming on YouTube. Okay, moving on. As I already mentioned, there will be a backwards. There will be the last. There was already the last version of PHP 5.6 with active support. There will be more versions for at least the next 2 years with security fixes. I'm sure there will be some, but probably not as frequent.
Just wanted to know that for 5.6, looking from the graph, it seems the only version that would have 2-year security support.
Yeah, I think that's probably because it's a major.
Yeah, so still the ones who are not upgrading, the ones who are not upgrading to 7th version, they could rely on this one for 2 more years.
Yes, if their hosting company does not force them to actually you have to deal with this new version. But well, Because I already seen people posting on support forums, oh, my hosting company broke my application because they forced me to use PHP 7.0. I think they forced the upgrade, but it didn't break anything, at least for the classes that they were talking about. The problem was not so much with the versions. It was probably some missing extension.
I don't
I'm
know.
not sure what it
I'm
was.
using one of the cheapest hostings, and even they have a native version, and then you can run your website in an emulated version in any version, even in 7.1. So that's probably just hosting company not knowing what are they doing, not providing options to clients to run an emulated version, or client doesn't know how to run an emulated version. I don't know. Hard to
Yeah.
tell.
And then what do you mean by emulated version? You mean a virtual
Yes. So
servers?
I don't know how they do it on the server actually, but yeah, in the settings I see PHP version, and it says it has a native. I don't remember. I think I told you in previous podcast, and then you can choose another version to run your code in. So you can set it up per website even. So this website runs in this version, PHP version, this in this one, and
Oh, I
it's
see.
there's no problem there.
But it's like a shared hosting
Yes,
company.
yeah, ByteHost I think it's called.
I think they have probably different servers for different versions, and they put you in whatever server as the version that you ask.
No, not really, because I have multiple websites on the same FTP server that I access, but they run in different PHP versions. So
Right.
they do something
Yeah,
more tricky there.
it's probably a shared file system between different servers.
Yeah, could be.
It's just a virtual machine accessing this multiple virtual machines accessing the same disk, and or they are just using Docker or something. I think.
Maybe. Progressive hosting. Nice.
I don't know, because I have seen people suggesting ways to run both multiple versions of PHP, but I'm not sure if it was that flexible in the end. Okay, moving on to the next topic, we are going to talk about an article that shows the evolution of PHP. And if I can share the screen, it would be great. Here. Okay, so I think I can increase a bit the font. So basically, this is an article by Christian Wiig that compile all PHP versions since PHP 5.0 through PHP 7.1, and also a new experimental branch that implements a JIT engine. It's something that is being worked on by Dmitry Stogov from Zen and his team. And what matters is that there were significant gains, at least for pure CPU tasks. Pure CPU tasks are those that do not require I/O operations like accessing databases, files, network connections, and so on.
Sessions.
Because once you need that, PHP will have to wait for whatever I/O operation to finish to move on. So there were like several benchmark scripts, and there is one that came from, I think it's from Zen. It's part of the PHP distribution. I mean the source distribution. It's very raw because that is not the typical code that you would write. This is just for the purpose of evaluating performance. And then Christian put together all these versions and run them, and it's like we've noticed that if I'm not mistaken, it's like 27 times faster from PHP 5 to PHP 7.1.
Yes. Wow.
Yes, so it's a lot, but if this is just for pure CPU tasks. There will be also a benchmark that has been working on with some time to actually run a typical WordPress homepage script to see how it goes. That is closer to a real world application. But what matters that the gains are not as significant as we can see here. That is because there are some I/O operations, probably reading files from either from cache or configuration files. I don't know. It depends on what the WordPress script will do. The idea to test WordPress is more to show a real-world application. Not that everybody likes WordPress, but many people use it. So this is just to give a reference. And from what I heard, the gains between PHP 7.1 and the experimental JIT branch are not as significant as for pure CPU tasks. As you may see here, there is almost a 50% gain between PHP 7.1 and what may be PHP 8 or PHP 7.2 with this JIT engine. And for when you use it for WordPress, I think the gains are just like 5%. So it's still something, but not a big deal. So, but still there will be a lot of work to optimize and develop this new branch. So let's wait and see. Anyway, one interesting thing that is also in this article is the list of changes that made PHP faster over time. There are many changes. I'm not going to review all of them here, just to mention that, there was a significant change between PHP 5 and PHP 7.0 due to many reasons. The original plan for PHP 7, which was not yet called 7, was PHP NG, was to make way to implement a JIT engine. But in the end, there were other types of optimizations that could be performed, and still it gained a lot of performance. For PHP 7.1, there were a few performance improvements, but a great part of them came from the optimization of PHP bytecode, or better, it should probably better be called opcode, I think. I think this came from what in the past used to be the Zend optimizer. Before executing PHP, you know that when the code is parsed, it is converted into opcode. It is just sort of assembly language that is interpreted and executed at runtime. And in PHP 7.1, it was integrated the optimization tricks, I would say, for these opcodes that came from Zend optimizers. Still, it gained a good bit of performance, as you may see here, like 40%, which is quite a lot. But still, this is for pure CPU tasks. We'll have to get back here when there are the results for real-world applications like WordPress. So about this article, I don't know if you have anything else to comment, Arthur, anything you wanted to mention?
I just tweeted it. That's really impressive. I don't know. There's nothing more to say. That's comparing the CPU intensive even tasks, but you can see the improvement and combining all the aspects of a change in each version. That's a really impressive work on author's side.
Yes, and well, there were many people that contributed for the performance improvement, but one of the people that probably contributed more to the actual performance tricks was Dmitry Stogov. Previously, he created one accelerating extension many years ago called Turk Cache, but then he moved on to Zend, and over there he continued to work on more improvements, but he was not the only one to work on those improvements. He mentioned that he had collaboration by Xinchen Hui and Nikita Popov for PHP 7 and later. So I don't know, besides the JIT engine, how far you can go to optimize PHP further in terms of raw CPU tasks performance, because we all know there is one thing missing in PHP, which is good asynchronous support. Not that you can't perform asynchronous tasks, but it's still not a natural thing in PHP. There is, I think it's called React PHP or something like that, that a library like that provides wrappers to run things asynchronously, but it's still in the level of Node.js before async and await. And async and await were implemented recently. Are you already using async and await in Node.js?
No, not yet.
Yeah. So it's the benefit of having asynchronous programming without having the callback hell pain. Anyway, somebody that could collaborate with the PHP core would be the Facebook people, because they have implemented async and await in the hack language, which is derived from PHP. So other than that, I don't think what else PHP can be improved. There are a few things like those bootstrap snapshot tricks, but which is good for applications that use frameworks that have long bootstrap times. But after that, I don't see anything else that could be improved. Maybe some new technology that we don't know yet. Okay, let's wait and see what comes after this. For now, there's still some work to do until it is ready for PHP 8 or PHP 7.2. But between now and then, there will be an update to this article to cover performance of WordPress. Okay, moving on to the next topic. If I find the share screen again, there we are going to start about some proposals that were presented last month. Since it was the month of Christmas vacation, I guess there were less proposals than in previous months, but still there were a few. A bit weird, I must confess, but there were a few proposals. The first that we are going to comment is one called magic casting, which is a proposal. I don't think it was very well accepted, but the idea is, for instance, a function that accepts an object of a certain class if you pass a different object, a different type of value. It will make PHP create an object of that class and call a new super method call underscore cast. And that will convert whatever is the value that is being passed. So the example here is to pass, let's say, a collection class. If you pass an array to a function that expects a collection, in the process, it will call the cast function to convert it. I don't know if this is something very appealing. What do you think, Arthur? Would this be something that you would like to use?
Maybe not specifically, but in some cases, I could find it useful. I think it could be used to, for example, I think in Java, every object has a method to string, and depends on the object what you have, it converts it to string differently. So you could do something similar. You could do a string class and then create custom methods for different types, like for number, for object, for JSON object, and stuff like that. And that there are no JSON objects, I think, in PHP, but well, you get the point. And so you can convert them differently to string, and
Yeah.
it all would work.
Well, I don't know, but what I know is, yeah, I actually we reviewed this before, and we had a hard time trying to follow what is being proposed here. Anyway, I think we described it more or less well. I hope so. So this is the proposal, having a magic cast method. PHP has already so many magic methods. That's one more. Okay, the next proposal, it's also not very clear, but this is an RFC to type generalization for throwable error codes. And I think this is for exception objects or throwable objects.
There's throwable exceptions to all of them, I think.
I didn't know that it had a second and a third parameter, or is this the proposal?
They had the third or second parameter an integer, second parameter an integer, I think, for forced. That's the only, I think, where they force, the only place when they force code to be integer or number, basically.
Yeah, but well, the idea, what says here is that allowing any type can open to new possibilities for this property that is currently almost useless, like enum sets objects. Well,
I think yeah. So basically, the problem is, to summarize, is that it seems to be that the correct way is to have a code as number, as integer, but for example, PDO extension misuses it, and it's not an integer, it's a string. The code is string. So instead of forcing PDO to use numbers, the suggestion is to allow to have numbers or strings in all of them, not only throwable, but in error and exception.
Yeah.
Like that.
Well, I don't know how exceptions work in other languages. It's not something that I use much. I never got to use much to exceptions, but for instance, in JavaScript, is there this flexibility of throwing things?
Yeah, sure.
The,
There is no specific properties, I think, like code mostly, but yes,
yeah.
you can throw exceptions.
No, of course I know you can throw exceptions. It was not invented in PHP. What I meant is there this thing of codes and
No, I think only place I've seen it is in Java, that they have
yeah.
code integer too. So I think it mostly would be suitable like for HTTP transactions, error code, like HTTP code and some stuff like that. So, but usually the problem is it throws the code and you look at the code and you need to look at the documentation what this error with this code actually means and stuff like that. Instead, they could use some string as error code that would make more sense to developer.
Well, I suspected that this was yet another proposal to copy Java. But I cannot say this very loud, or else people will say that I'm passing misinformation and things like that. I really have no idea. Let me pin this here. I was showing this one. Okay. Well, this is not a big deal, but that's the kind of things that weird things that are being proposed this month. Next, there was a rehash of a proposal that was submitted already in 2012, and once in a while they come back because it was voted and it was declined, but they are trying to get it back, which would be to implement what they call property accessors, very similar to C#. Basically, you could, for each variable, you could define functions that would be calling when you are getting, setting, and checking if it is set, and then setting a variable of class. And I find it interesting that people are so eager to make PHP like Java that they no longer call variables they call properties, and the functions are not functions are methods.
Normally, it's
object-oriented
approach.
Yes. Oh, right. It's only object-oriented approach if it is like Java. So we might as well end this podcast and start another one called Lately in Java.
Question: how do you know it's similar to C#? Do you know C# well?
Oh, because I read the proposal before. This was not. I missed the original article because this is the old proposal, the one that was declined. I should have pasted the URL of the actual discussion that is being rehashed. But personally, I think this is fine because you no longer call getters and setters. You just assign the variable and implicitly it will call the getters and setters. What I do not like here is to have to define a getter and setter for each variable.
If you want to only, I don't think it's mandatory. So it's easier if you either way going to do them. It's better to have them in one place in one scope, so it's more readable.
Yeah, I don't know if you can define only one type, one setter and getter. Okay, people nowadays are writing so much complicated PHP code that sometimes I have a hard time reviewing and approving classes in PHP classes because I spend a lot of time trying to understand what that means, to see what is the purpose of each class. But okay, that's the sign of times, it's progress. So I'm not complaining. Okay, anyway, moving on to the next topic. And this one is probably even harder to understand, which is about starting using objects instead of resources. Resources, this is the name of opaque values that are being used since PHP, well, since the beginning of PHP. For instance, when we establish a connection to a database, it will return a resource value, which in practice is an integer number, which is just a reference to something that internally has some data regarding, for instance, the database connections, probably has some socket information. But this is transparent for PHP developers. It should not matter. So the proposal here seems to be to return objects instead of resources, and those objects will be called hash contexts. That is, if I'm getting this right, and I admit I may not be getting this right. I don't know. Arthur, did you understand what was the purpose of this?
Well, sort of, yeah. So basically, as you said, currently, or not currently, but previously, there was a hash init, hash underscore init function which returned the resource, and then you pass it all the other functions so that you want to do something with your hash. It's like instead of returning an instance, it returns the reference to a resource. Yes. So, but now they want to migrate it to object-oriented approach, to Java style, as you also said. Okay, but that was a joke. But yeah, so and the class would be called, or is already maybe called hash context. I don't know in what state it is. And so instead of using resources and static functions, you would use object-oriented approach and have an instance and do the things on it.
Yeah. Well, maybe this is actually a cool feature, and we don't know. We'll probably figure it out in a few years. It's like traits. Traits, it's a cool feature, but when it was proposed, it was not really obvious. Oh, that will create messy code. But in the end, when you start seeing really good traits, oh, this is cool. You can actually turn any object into anything else unrelated with the object, but it's useful. Like, oh, I have a database access class that can also be a collection of something, result sets or something. And well, we need to wait and see what will be the good applications of this proposal when this proposal is finally implemented, because for now it is not being yet under voting. So moving on to one last topic, it is what they call decorator classes. Well, as we know, decorator classes are meant for implementing the decorator pattern, and usually it's something like, oh, before and after calling this function, you also call these functions, probably adding some data before and after the result of the decorated function. So the proposal here, if I got this right, is to have a new keyword called decorates, and I don't know what else is different. It's probably just a variant of extends. Instead of having the keyword extends, it would be called decorate. But I did not follow the implications of this proposal. I don't know. Arthur, did you understand what would be the?
Yeah, I think yes. It basically is the same as extend. I don't see much of a difference. I know. I have not used PHP for quite some time. So if you do extend and you are not implementing all the methods, they are proxy to the original class, right?
Sorry, I didn't follow what you
So
mean.
if you use extend on a class and you do not implement or override all the methods that original class has, so the original class methods are called, right?
Right.
Yeah. So
That's that's
I
how
really
inheritance works.
so I really don't see the
The difference, right?
difference. Yeah. The only thing
It's
that's
because
okay, it seems to be storing the instance to original class in the this decorated property, and that's all.
yeah.
So it's like
Well,
a new class only with a reference to the old instance internally or something like that.
somebody that commented just said, "Oh, this is just too much syntax sugar, and it will save very little time while implementing a few methods that take." Okay, well, that's probably right. I don't know. For me, it's not that I use the decorated pattern every day, but I can understand this may be useful to provide branding. Let's say if you have a system and let's say a forum system, but you want to implement some branding instead of using the plugins and such for that some people use like WordPress that start calling global functions everywhere. You could use the decorator pattern. Well, but it makes sense because not everything for implementing plugins is like decoration. And well, it's like that comment said, probably not a big benefit to just to make it called explicitly decoration instead of extension. I don't know. That's what it seems to me. Well, anyway, for this month, we have covered all the new topics. Since we are in January, I can see there is already more activity, and next month we'll be covering more of these proposals for PHP and related matters. So with this, we practically ended this podcast. And on my behalf, that is all for now. Bye.
Bye.